Good evening. So this is the last part of my little extended discussion of is the guitar is the guitar in decline? Is the guitar dying? And on the first night, I kind of talked about is music itself kind of declining in a way, at least its prominence in the culture. We talked about how music is really when a lot of us were growing up, it was one of the most important parts of culture. Right up there with sports or movies. And people really listened to albums. I remember the lyrics would be printed on albums, and it was more mainstream. And there was a lot, there was pretty serious music. And even kind of bubblegum music was really well done, and I think it was taken pretty seriously. I'm not saying it's not like that now, and in all honesty, I don't listen to all that much newer music. So, but there does seem to, you can Google it. There do seem to be a lot of articles, discussion threads about the decline of the guitar. But is there a decline in music? That's sort of, I guess that was one of the things I talked about the first night. And then last night I talked about something that I don't think gets talked about enough, and that is, how in the last 50 years we've had like a war on drugs, we've had smoking laws. Those are things no one, no politician ever wants to go against, really, at least not, maybe it's changing, but, schools are bigger, they've got cops in all the schools now. They have psychologists in all the schools that, want to analyze every kid that's maybe going through an adolescent phase or something, and getting paid good money for it, by the way. And I think all that, maybe it's good in some ways. I'm not trying to pass judgment, but I do think it hurts music in some ways. Just the overall institutionalization of our society, all the red tape and the bureaucracy that we've created around life in general, and maybe especially young people. And maybe that's part of the reason, one of the things that a lot of these articles about the decline of the guitar notice, really all the great guitar players that are like iconic, like household names, they're not 50 or 60, they're 70 and 80 years old, and even the younger ones are often in their 40s and 50s. I guess John Mayer and there are a lot of great younger. You watch YouTube. There's some awesome guitar players that are younger, and I think maybe YouTube is a way to find an outlet for some of these guys. But the world of bands and live concerts and shows is more. I think last night I said I feel like it's more limited than it used to be. Now maybe it's dependent on where you live or how old you are. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but that's my impression, and I imagine some of you agree with me. But tonight I kind of wanted to finish up and just have a few comments about other social changes in our culture that I do think, and I don't want to get too much into these, but I think they play a role. We've had a decline in birth rate, so that might be good. I guess for a lot of reasons, the pill. Roe v. Wade, I don't know, if you take your pick, but we definitely have had a decline in birth rate. So a lot of rock and roll is associated with the baby boom. Well, that was the baby boom started right after World War II, and that was a time when people got married, had kids. The marriages weren't always great, and you had your Ralph Cramdens and, your I Love Lucy's, where they did a fair share of marital squabbling, but but they got married, they had kids, and those, if you think about it, those were the kids that grew up to play rock and roll. And they certainly, there was a dark side to that. I'm not sitting here saying we should go back to the 50s, in case you think that, but there were a lot of kids. I mean, there were a lot of kids, and that's in some ways a sign of a healthy society when you've got a lot of kids. You know, because just like, you know, you've got young people, you know, that's a sign of health, right? You know, it's just old people, it's a sign of you're getting older. And at some point, that's closer to death. That's just sort of the basic reality of the lifespans. But in the 50s and 60s, you had a lot of young people, and they were ripping and roaring and ready to go, and there was a lot going on. I mean, you could point to the Vietnam War and so on, but I think the declining birth rate. Now, you demographers out there, you can correct me, and you maybe can say it's a good thing, you know, that we've had some of the social change that we've had. But there is you know, I do think it's sort of a rock and roll and music is kind of a numbers game, you know, and you know, you had all those kids, you know, and for one, you know, you got a lot of geniuses and very expressive artistic people that are part of that population bulge of millions and millions and millions of young people. And plus you've got all those young people that give you a big audience, you know, they want to buy your records, and they, you know, so it's kind of that baby boomer generation was kind of a built-in dynamic. And now people say like, okay, boomer, and you know, that's fine, but just think about the demographics of that. And today I think, you know, in a lot of communities they talk about a child desert. You know, another thing, this is but you know, in some like I was watching a movie called The Temptations. I actually want to do a review of it, and I read the book by Otis Williams that it's based on, who is the really founder of The Temptations. And I was just thinking about all the young men in Detroit, young African American men, by the way, you know, and they you know, a lot of them weren't from the, you know, the beautiful parts of Detroit or something, but they were you know, they were you know, smart, creative people and strong young guys. Barry Gordy, and look what they did, you know. And I think the demographics, you know, I don't know if it's mass incarceration or the war on drugs or maybe the welfare state. Those are all kind of political questions, and I really, you know, I don't know, and I don't want to talk about that. But if you think about it, the demographics have changed, but a lot of that, you know, the strength of the society in those years produced a lot of great music, you know. Strong, healthy, young people that were producing, you know, great, awesome music, you know. So I do think, you know, there's a demographic change. Another one I kind of alluded to in one of the previous videos was young people. There were several studies. I guess I could link them. I just read about them in the media, you know, like New York Times or the Washington Post. But young people the rates of having sex are way down for young people. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that, and again, a lot of them quickly become sort of, I don't want to say political discussions, but, you know, I don't know, but I think that's a pretty straightforward fact. Young people, they don't have sex. People marry much later. But I remember in this article in the Washington Post, it was talking about that, like a lot of parents actually discourage their kids from forming, like, they don't, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend type relationships, because it's because they're so focused on work and getting through school and things like that, that they you know, they don't necessarily say, I don't want to get married, I don't want to have a boyfriend, I don't want to have a girlfriend, but they do kind of postpone those decisions. And if you think about it, a lot of the music we grew up with, it was, I love you, baby, will you wear my ring? You know, will you go to the dance with me on Friday night? You know, I'm going to the chapel and I'm going to get married. And there was a lot of romance and love, and it was young love. I mean, it wasn't like two 39-year-old people, you know, kind of negotiating, you know, should we partner together or something. It was like young, overwhelming, chemical, hormonal love was in all that music, you know. Some of it was sexual, but a lot of it was romantic. But it was young people love. And I was thinking about that, and if it's true that a lot of young people don't have sex, and that whether that's sort of a decision that whether that's sort of a conscious decision or something that kind of happens because of a shift in values and priorities, or the sort of set of facts that they deal with as opposed to some teenager in 1967, I don't know, but obviously that affects music. How much music is about love songs, Actually, the other thing is, I don't think the old dance, I know they still have formals and things. I don't want to make, but like when I was in junior high, we had a dance once a month in the gym, the smelly old gym, and there was a local band there. I always wondered how they were doing, but they, back then it was kind of like, this was in the early 70s, there'd always be a couple kids that just be out there just almost looking like they were having some kind of a muscular spasm dancing, but most of the kids would just stand there on the sides for the bulk of the dance and then finally kind of venture out. But there was a lot of, slow dancing, and then these were like 13, 14-year-old kids, and it was kind of, I guess I would see that as a sort of a way to learn about, that part of life, and, it was good, and there were chaperones at the dances and everything. But someone told me that bars, and that it were like that in bars. Like I remember when people would dance even just in a bar to jukeboxes, you'd see a lot of dancing. And I don't know, sometimes I think you don't see as much of that anymore. And someone told me it's because they fear lawsuits. Like, that's why you see a lot of bars don't emphasize, dancing Friday night. We got this great dance band, everybody dance. I don't know if that's true. But I've actually had a couple different people that work in the food and entertainment industry tell me that dancing in some of the bars these days is it's more trouble than it's worth, I guess. Yeah, I guess if people dance, in the corner or something, they're not, it's fine. But like in terms of really kind of promoting it as something to do, or maybe people just don't do it. But if you think about it, you take away sex and love, you're not going to have the same kind of music. I mean, how much music of the 60s and 70s that I love, that you love, was about I love you, be my girl, you're so beautiful. Sometimes it was, you're so hot or whatever, and that was okay too. But a lot of it was really romantic, and it was young love, it's like 17, 18-year-old kids, puppy love, as Donny Osmond sang, and I do think that's kind of an interesting issue. So certainly, I'm not, but there's been a lot of change, and just think about it. Every change has byproducts, unintended consequences. Some changes happen as a result of things that need to change. Obviously, that's good. And I am not commenting on, change, or should this be like this or that. But those are just some observations that I don't see that much when music comes up. I think the war on drugs really hurt music. People can't, people don't party anymore. Like I hate to say it, but a lot of the music we grew up with and loved was drugs were part of that scene. You ever heard that joke? What did the Deadhead say when he ran out of marijuana? These guys suck, But I mean, it was part of that scene, and and if you, I think the war on drugs really, was trying to fight something that's really bad for people, which is drugs. But you can't just kind of steamroller over all the other aspects. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. They were all part of the sort of equation. And certainly not advocating that, but don't kid yourself if you clamp down on youth culture and and you stick everybody in a straitjacket, you're not going to get too many Lennon and McCartneys out of that crew, unless they somehow break free. So, So those were my final thoughts. I had one other final thought, which is technology changing music? That might be kind of a more positive take. Maybe the guitar is just becoming outmoded. Maybe they're, like the harpsichord is cool. It's kind of a historic instrument. The Beatles used one in my life, right? But the piano's a better instrument. I mean, and that's again that objective. I mean, the piano can sustain notes and play chords, so maybe the guitar is just kind of obsolete. I mean, there's that possibility, I guess. But and maybe computers. But I've had some people, video games. There's a lot of things that young people have today. We have so much content on the TV. I watch too much TV. I like YouTube. That's probably my favorite thing to watch. But there are a lot of things that compete for young people's attention today. And I remember we used to just sit around and listen to albums like for an hour or two, like really listen to them, like just sit and listen to them, maybe talk a little bit, but just actually listen to those albums. And there's just so many things that compete for people's attention today. And maybe it's just culture changing. It's not necessarily better. It's not necessarily worse. Rock and roll, maybe it was of its time, the way kind of jazz of the 20s or big swing of the 30s and 40s, and cocktail music. And it all is still kind of around, in its place. But all those things were the dominant music of their day, and maybe that's what's happening to rock and roll. But some things, like to the extent that young people are in such regimented institutional environments, they have the lack of after school freedom. They can't be alone for 45 minutes without some kind of supervisor, and and when they do have music, it has to be sort of very structured. Kind of like sports is like that, I mean, there's a place for, obviously a lot of kids learn a lot of sports, but when it's too structured all the time, then you kind of lose sandlot baseball, and actually you get pretty good at, playing sandlot with your friends too, because a lot of times that's where you spend more time playing, so you got to do it enough so it comes naturally to you, and that's not an extracurricular school activity. That's something you love doing, that you do a lot in your free time. Things that you consider an extracurricular activity, that sort of means it's not really your free time, it's part of your structured life. And music is something you get good at in a way from your free time. And I don't mean just like leisure, idle hours, but it's something you like to do, and when you have time to do it, you do it. It's not part of a structure of extracurricular activities. So those are some of my thoughts. I thought I'd share those. It'd be interesting to see what folks say in the comments. I actually don't know what my ultimate conclusion is. I'm trying to think of something profound to say. I do think every generation changes, every society changes, and music always changes. Pete Townsend, the music must change. He also sang "Rock is Dead, Long Live Rock." Great song off, was Odds and Sods. But one thing I do believe, if I'm going to end with a conclusion, it's this: it's freedom. I don't want to sound like Braveheart, but freedom. Rock and roll is freedom. It's not politics. It's not. It's not technique. It's not. It's freedom. It's a spirit, and it's about people, and it's it's hard to imagine rock and roll in a like an oppressive communist country. Rock and roll is actually one of the things that brought down communism in East Europe. I was in East Germany right after the fall of communism, and we were in a church where I forget the name, but they were a German punk rock band. But in East Germany, they'd become very popular, and they were banned by the communist government there. But they practiced in the church because the communist government was less able to go into the church. So the priest had kind of sympathized with these young guys, and he would let them go into the church and practice, all this angry punk, sort of Eastern European punk rock. And they'd be up there at the altar, but the priest was kind of cool, and he would let them do it. But it's hard to imagine the Beatles, the Stones, the Who, Led Zeppelin, all those in a communist country or North Korea, isn't it? Kind of hard. It's freedom. That doesn't mean you have to be stupid or excessive or be self-destructive, but rock and roll was a product of our world, I guess our Western world, if you want, of freedom and democracy. It really was, and it's awesome. And I think as years go by, people realize more and more how awesome the music of those few years was. But I hope people still keep playing the guitar, and if the guitar becomes like the accordion or the lute or the harpsichord, I'm glad I play it. But I'm also hoping that something cool replaces it. Like, I don't know, I feel like it'd probably be something with the computer, I don't know, or some kind of new instrument. I hope it's not replaced with nothing. That would be too bad. God bless you. You take care.